I think we're about to start. So welcome everybody to this GGP-Connect webinar. My name is Anne Gauthier. I'm director of the GGP, the Generation and Gender program. We started last year this series of GGP-Connect webinar as a way of showcasing the work of our national teams that are currently or recently implemented our survey, the Generation and Gender survey. Today, though, we flip things around and put the spotlight instead on the team here at NIDI, the Netherlands Interdisciplinary Demographic Institute, where the GGP headquarters, the so-called Central Hub, is located. So the team will be presenting first methodological insights into some of the dimension of running the GGS based on some countries. So the presentation by the team, with some of whom you see on the screen at the moment, the presentation will last about 20 to 30 minutes. During that time, please use the Q&A button in your screen, in your Zoom, in order to ask questions even during the webinar. When we finish after the presentation, though, we'll turn to these questions. You'll have the opportunities also to ask live your question if you want to. So having said that, I'm giving it to the team, and Siyang will be starting, followed by Arieke. So.
Thank you, Anne. And thank everyone for joining the session with us. So today, I'm very happy to be able to present the work that is jointly done by the fieldwork team and also Shell. So today's presentation, we will focus on interview duration and breakoffs in Norway, Finland, and Estonia. The reason why we focus on these two aspects is because they are important to many parties. It is important to fieldwork preparation, to applying for fund, but also at the same time, it is important from a scientific perspective. Next slide, please. Yes, so this is today's agenda. I will first give a short introduction. I believe we have a very informed audience here, but just bear with me. I will tell you a little bit more about the GGS Round 2 questionnaire and also the mode. And the second part, I will talk about the length of GGS second round questionnaire and the web interview duration. And the third part, Arieke will introduce a bit about the breakoff patterns and the predictors of survey completion. And last but not the least, we will discuss some of the key findings that we have found. Next slide, please. Yes, so we all know that the GGS Round 1 has successfully done between 2004 and 2012, and starting from 2017 onwards, we started a new round of data collection, GGS Round 2. In GGS Round 2, we implemented a new CORE, a new baseline survey questionnaire that is very comparable to the GGS Round 1, but we also included some innovative questions on, for example, mobility, digital contact with your parents, with your children, and also the sustainable development goals items. In addition to the new baseline survey, we also allow countries to add a few country-specific questions that are interesting to the countries. For example, the COVID questions, the global uncertainty questions on whether or not you're concerned about pandemic, about climate change, etc. And there are also additional country-specific question that deals with cost and benefits of childbearing that is based on Miller theory. So this is the new questionnaire setting, basically. Next slide, please. And another feature of GGS Round 2 is that we switched from CAPI, which is the face-to-face survey collection mode, to multi-mode. As you can see from the table here, we included all the GGS Round 2 countries and territories that are already finished the survey or that are still in field or preparing to start the fieldwork soon. And we can see from the table is that actually most of our GGS Round 2 countries and territories conducts web or web as a main component surveys. We are very much aware that this is a little bit different from what we said in the technical guidelines, but yeah, this is also for practical reasons that the reason why so many countries choose a web only is because we experienced the pandemic. So this is really very practical solution to the situation. So today we will be focusing on Norway, Finland, and Estonia. The reason why we chose to focus on these three countries is because they have finished the wave 1 data collection, and they are 100% web survey. And there are also an important reason is that there are paradata that are available for us to analyze the interview duration. Next slide, please. A bit more background about the fieldwork in these three countries. So they all have population register as the sampling framework. They have all used lottery conditional on completion as their incentive scheme. And the age range is slightly different between the countries. For Norway and Finland, they conducted a survey within 18 to 54 age range. And for Estonia, the age range is 18 to 59. So the length of the GGS round 2 questionnaire and web interview duration. So I will first talk about how do we measure these two items. The length of GGS round 2 questionnaire is basically the number of questions or items answered by respondents. We only include respondents who actually finished the survey. So the survey completion is defined as people reaches the last question of the questionnaire. And the interview duration is defined as the time in minutes that it takes to complete the survey. The method or the data that we used here is actually the paradata, which is defined as the auxiliary data collected in a survey that describe the data collection process. And here we have more specifically the session time between the session time of each respondent. So we can take out the process that people do, and which is very common if you conduct a web survey that people take small breaks in between. So that's why we use the paradata to calculate interview duration. And we know from practice and also a little bit from the theories that the length and the interview duration heavily depends on first whether or not they are country-specific questions. So basically how long the survey is. And it also depends on respondents' demographics and life histories. This is because we could collect so many questions on whether if you have partner and the partner characteristics and also the ex-partners and the children that you have. So the more complex life history that you have, the more questions you will get eventually. It also depends a little bit on the language that you use and also other characteristics, other factors such as internet speed, respondents' cognitive abilities, etc. So in Norway and Finland, it is important to mention the questionnaire setup in these three countries. So in Norway and Finland, they have the core questionnaire and they had 35 to 31 additional items. And in Finland, there are 2 languages. And in Estonia, there are more additional questions included, and there are also 2 languages that were conducted. So we focus on, because the question length and also the time duration depends on the demographics and life histories. So we hypothetically make 2 scenarios that we think are relevant for the questionnaire. The first scenario is when the respondent, we imagine if a respondent that is single, age below 50, had no ex-partner or children, and what would be the questionnaire look like for this person. And we also imagine the second scenario when the respondent has currently with a partner and is age below 50 and has 1 ex-partner and 2 children. Yes, next. So here we show the graph of a general distribution in all 3 countries of the web interview duration. So what can we see from the graph is that it takes most people between 40 to 60 minutes to finish the entire survey. What we can also see from the graph is that the time duration or the interview duration is a little bit dragged by the end, by the large numbers at the right-hand side. We show here the maximum duration is 600 minutes, but we also have extreme cases where it takes more than 10 hours, the 600 minutes to finish the web survey. And this is also why in the upcoming analysis, we focus only on the median and also the 10% and 90th percentile of the web interview duration. Next slide, please. So let's focus a little bit more on Norway first. So with Norway, please next slides, you can see the emphasis here. And also next one. Yes, so here you can see for Norway, the total median duration is about 49 minutes, but it also varies by respondents or our hypothetical scenarios. So for scenario 1, for those single people, they only spend about 36 minutes to finish the survey. And for people with family and children, it takes more time for them to finish the survey, about 51 minutes. And the number of items, next slides, please. It also shows the same patterns. So in total, the median number is 256 items. But if you are single, you have less questions to answer if compared to those who are married and with children. Next slides, please. Besides this, besides these overall differences, we can also see within a country, there are also variations within these groups. So you can see that the median length duration ranges from 30 minutes to 180 minutes. And the number of questions also varies between 188 items to 297 items. So these within country, within group variances is also important, also shown here in this table. Let's now look at the cross-country differences. So next slides, please. Thank you. For Norway and Finland and Estonia, we see here that it takes about 49 minutes to 62 minutes to finish the survey. And the time duration or the median duration also corresponds to the number of questions that are there in these 3 countries. We show that before the questionnaire for Norway and Finland are more comparable, and Estonia has more country-specific questions. So here the item numbers is also different across these 3 countries. Next slide, please. So this is the end of my part, and I will give it to Arieke to talk a bit more about breakoffs.
Okay, thank you. So talk about the patterns of breakoffs in these 3 countries, and also about predictors of breaking off or survey completion. Somehow now the next button is not working. Well, I just used it all the time while Siyang was talking. Let's see. Why is it not working anymore? Okay, it started working. What is breaking off, and why are we investigating it? So we define breaking off as when a respondent starts the questionnaire, but does not complete it. And by starting, here we mean logging into the questionnaire. So if you logged in, you're kind of in these analyses, even if you did not even answer the first question. And completion is answering the last question. Well, breaking off is a problem because it results in a lower sample, of course, sample that finished the whole questionnaire. And as we will see later, breaking off is also biased. So this adds to non-response bias. Breaking off is mostly a problem in self-administered surveys. And of course, in paper surveys, you wouldn't know about it. Or, well, I don't know how often half-finished questionnaires are sent back, but in web surveys, we can see this because all answers are saved. So also if someone stops halfway, we get the answers that are filled in. Well, for us, it's especially interesting to look at this because the GGS has a very long questionnaire. So the question is, do lots of people break off? And you can also see if there are problematic sections or modules in the questionnaire. So I'll say a bit more about the 3 countries we are looking at. We already saw they all use the population register as the sampling framework, and they all had a lottery. Here I'll add that in Norway, the fieldwork agency was the National Statistical Bureau, SSB, so they conducted the survey, while in Estonia and Finland, there were commercial survey agencies, because these kind of things might influence how many people even start the survey. The contact mode, so how respondents were initially contacted, also differed. In Norway and Estonia, it was mostly through email, and in Norway also by SMS. And in these countries, there was an individualized link in the email. So people could just click on the link and they would go straight to the survey, and they didn't have to enter the access code, the individual access code. In Finland, printed letters were sent via ordinary mail, and the reminders were also mostly through printed letters. And then it means that respondents have to go to a landing page first. That's a page before the actual survey, by copying a link or using a QR code, and then they have to type in their individual access code. So it takes a bit more effort to start the survey. And you'll see in the next slide why I'm explaining these details. So here I have a very simplified picture of what happens from, let's say, from invitation to completing. So on the y-axis, you see percentages. And 100% is everyone who's in the gross sample. So everyone who was sent an invitation. We don't know if everyone received it, but that's what I calculated as 100%. Then the next point is the percentage that actually logged in without maybe even answering a question. And we see this ranges from over 50% in Norway to under 20% in Finland. And then we see how many people actually completed the survey, which ranges from about 30% in Norway to, I think, about 70% in Finland. And what we see is that, the more people log in, the higher the break-off rate. So in Finland, less people logged in, but if they started, it took a bit, as I explained, for them, they didn't just have to click a link, but they had to take a bit more effort, enter the access code. So if they went through that effort, there was less chance that they would break off halfway the survey. As you can see, the first part is the biggest problem. How do we get people to even start the survey, to log in? But in this presentation, we'll focus on the second part. Where do people break off, and which people break off? I also wanted to add that later this year, we will have web surveys as well in Austria, the Netherlands, Croatia, Taiwan, and Hong Kong. And these countries will use unconditional or conditional incentives, or both, for everyone. So not only a lottery, but everyone will get some money. So we hope, but we're curious to see if this will result in a better picture. So more people starting the survey, and hopefully also more people completing the survey. So here I focus on this right-hand part of the previous graph, and here 100% is everyone who logged in. And then on the x-axis, I've added first intro. This means the people who proceeded past the introduction text, so the first slide that you see, or the first web page that you see within the survey. And then I've added all the modules in our questionnaire. So, for example, for Norway and Estonia, we see those were the countries where you went straight to the introduction text by just clicking on a link, and then we see a lot of people then actually start reading the introduction text and do not even proceed past the introduction text. Well, in Finland, they went to a landing page before this introduction text. So we see if they log in, they're more likely to proceed after the introduction text. So you could also say starting the survey is actually this point, this point, the first dots, proceeding after the intro. You could say that's a more fair comparison, and then of course the picture would look slightly different. Well, we also see then that most of the breakups happen in the first section, the demographic section, and also a lot happen in the LHI section, which is the life history section. So this section, the life history section, is very short if you don't have any ex-partners and you don't have any children, because in this section we ask a set of questions for each ex-partner and each child or each ex-partner you lived with. So this can be either a long and a bit repetitive section, but also it can also be a short section. We also see that if you finish the first few modules, you're very likely to finish the rest of the questionnaire. So yeah, it's really important to keep people in the beginning. And I would say it doesn't really matter that the work module, for example, can also be quite long for those with a partner, because people who reach that module at the end, they will most likely finish the survey. So remember here, it looks like Norway performs worst, but remember from the previous slide, in the end, they performed best because in terms of response rates, because more people started the survey at all. Also note that I exaggerated here a bit the breakoffs because the y-axis starts at 50%. So it's not as dramatic as it looks, but it makes it more clear visually. Well, then I'm going to look at predictors of breaking off. And because, well, Siyang has already explained this, the respondent's life history influences the questionnaire. Our question is, does survey completion depend on the respondent's life history? So the background is a bit, is it problematic that we ask questions about all co-residential ex-partners? Is it problematic that we ask questions about all children, including stepchildren? Does it make people break off? And we also control for background variables and the device, because it's known from the literature that people who take a survey on a smartphone are more likely to break off. So the variables, the respondent characteristics I'm looking at are whether you have a partner, because then you get questions about the partner, about your relationship, the quality, about division of tasks, about the characteristics of the job of your partner. So in different sections, different modules throughout the questionnaire, you get more questions if you have a partner. Then we look at the number of previous co-residential partners, because for each of them, you get a loop, so a set of questions in the LHI section. And also for each child and each stepchild, even, let's say, ex-stepchildren, so stepchildren you had with ex-partners, you get a loop in the LHI section. So if you have a partner or more ex-partners and more children, the questionnaire does not only become longer, but also more difficult, because about each of these persons, we ask a lot of dates, like birth dates, start and end dates of relationships. So this might be quite difficult, especially if it's about ex-partners or stepchildren, perhaps. Perhaps respondents find this LHI section also more repetitive if they get the same questions about multiple people. And maybe they find it privacy sensitive to report on other persons than themselves. So because of these reasons, you could expect that having a partner and having more co-residential ex-partners or more children makes you less likely to complete the survey. Well, in the analysis, I'm going to show all these predictors are derived from the survey data, not from registers. So the analytical sample is selective because, for example, to know the number of children in our survey, you only know this when the respondent has completed the full DEM section, the first section, and half of the second section. So you already get people who finished, who didn't drop out in the beginning. I don't think it's problematic for the goal of this analysis, because For example, you get all these questions about the children after we know the total number of children. So only after we know this, you get these loops that might be difficult or boring or repetitive. The same goes for the number of ex-partners. Only when we know this, then you get the total number, you get the questions about each of them. So I'll show the model build up. I did binary logistic regression analysis with the 3 countries pooled. So I'll show results of 3 models, and you see from the sample size that they become more and more selective. So for the first model, that only includes the background characteristics, so sex, age, education, being a first-generation immigrant, the device, that's a PC or a laptop, so big screen or a tablet or phone, and the country dummy. So to be included in this model, the respondent has to have finished about 5 questions. So these is everyone who didn't drop really in the beginning. So the N is over 19,000 of the 3 countries combined. In the second module, I added whether one has a question and the number of co-residential ex-partners. I added both variables at the same time because when you add having a partner separately, it doesn't have an effect. And even in this model too, having a partner does not have an effect either. So to know this information, the number of co-residential partners, the respondent has reached the first question of the second module. So basically they finished the DEM section and then the first question or the second question of the second module. So we have a bit less respondents, almost 18,000. And then in the third model, I add the number of children, all types of children combined, biological, adoptive, and stepchildren. And to know this, we've reached, or the respondent has reached the halfway, the LXI section, as I said before. And I also include whether there are stepchildren among these children. So I show the results in terms of predicted probabilities of survey completion, so the opposite of breaking off, holding all variables constant at their means. Remember that the sample is already a bit selective. These are people who finished the first 5 questions. So therefore, you see a bit higher completion rates than you might expect based on the earlier graphs. I indicated for each variable which group was the reference group. And basically all differences are significant, except for if the difference is only 1%. But the sample size is so large that I think significance is not the interesting thing to look at, but it's more the effect size here. Note again that I enlarge the differences by starting the y-axis at 60%. So I'm, of course, what we want to see is small effects or no effects. So there's no or small bias, but I enlarge it a bit. Well, I must say I find the differences between men and women not too bad. So it's 77 versus 80% completing. Differences between the age groups also not too big, ranges between 77 and 82%. Then for education, the differences are a bit bigger. So the lower educated are, well, 71% of them finishes it, and the higher educated, 82%. Also for being an immigrant, immigrants, 72% of them finishes it, and 80% of the non-immigrants. But there the differences are a bit bigger. And then we also see, well, there's no difference between finishing it on a PC or laptop or a tablet. But people who finish the survey on a phone or do the survey on a phone, might not finish it, 74% finishes it. So, and bear in mind that in these 3 countries, the percentage that completes the survey or takes the survey on the phone ranges, I think, between 50 and 75%. So it's really a lot of people do this. Then we go, so this is the first model, then we go to the next model, where I show only one variable, the number of previous residential partners. But in this model, I also included whether one has a partner, but it didn't have an effect in this model. The number of previous co-residential partners does have an effect. So we see if you don't have one, your completion rate is 85%. And it decreases to 74% for those with 3 or more partners. But this is really a very small percentage of the sample who has 3 or more previous co-residential ex-partners. But still, well, if you've reached, you finished the first section, you came here, then still 74% of those finish the survey. Then in model 3, I added whether one has children, how many children one has, and whether there are stepchildren. And then also having a partner became significant. So once you control for the number of children, the effect of having a partner is significant. So that's why I show it in model 3. Well, first, the number of children. As I expected, indeed, having more children decreases the chances of survey completion. But I don't find the effect that big. It ranges between 89% for those with no children to 82% with those with 3 or more children. And then we see there's a small difference between those, when you control for the number of children, it turns out that those with a partner are actually slightly more likely to finish the questionnaire, even though it's longer. So this goes against my expectations. And we see that having stepchildren also has a very small negative effect, but it's actually smaller than I expected. So these were the results. I wanted to mention that, well, of course, these bias effects add to non-response effects, but it might be, as for example, that people with children find our survey more interesting, so they're more likely to start the survey. And for example, in Norway, one of the 3 countries included here, they already compared the TFR based on the survey data with the TFR based on the national statistics. And it was actually pretty similar. So in terms of number of children, at least we're not doing that bad, or not in Norway, even though they had a high breakoff rate. So then I go to the conclusion. First, we saw that the median interview duration in these 3 countries ranged from 49 to 62 minutes. But the variation in interview duration within a country between respondents is much larger. And this is partly due, like we showed, to the heavy routing and filtering and loops in the questionnaire. So the number of questions you actually get differs a lot. It ranges, if you look at, yeah, it can differ a few hundred questions actually. Then if we look at the breakoffs, I thought that the difference in breakoff or completion by sex, age, having a partner, and the life histories are not too bad, actually, not too big. The lower educated and immigrants are a bit more problematic in terms of breaking off. And yeah, this is similar to what we know about non-response in general. We also see that taking the survey on the phone is then people are more likely to break off. We're working on improving the interface, but we also see this in the literature. So we think it's partly due to the fact that people who are on the phone are more distracted. And yeah, it's hard to do something about that. And this was it. Thank you for your attention. Will I stop sharing or?
Yes, probably, so that we can. Great. Thank you so much, Arieke, for these insights. And the Q&A has been active. I'll pick up on some of them, even though they have been answered already. And in the meantime, for the others, by all means, do type your question in Q&A, or alternatively, you can also raise your hand among the attendees, and we will get to you. So. There's a lot of question in, as I said, in the Q&A, and one of them, Martin Kredel from from Czechia was asking about where the country-specific questions items were located, and typically they were towards the end of the questionnaire, and that's what that's the guideline that we provide to countries. So if we think in terms of survey duration, this is at one point we would be able to see that, but also in terms of break-off, this is something we would be able to also analyze it because they're mainly at the end. There was another question about whether or not people interrupt and relog in different sessions. So I wonder if one of you want to, Wojtek did answer quickly this question in QA, but does one of you want to address this question of repeated login? What do we know about it?
I could take that question. Xiao actually looked at that for us. We can indeed see that, and we do see that many people log in repeatedly. And in this calculation of interview duration, as Siyang said, the time in between is taken out. But we also see that some sessions take really long, actually. So we don't understand that totally, technically, because normally you automatically log off if you don't do anything after a certain amount of minutes. We have that in the settings. So we don't really understand how sessions can last that long. But Xiao, do you remember how many sessions people typically have, or the range?
I would say most people still only have one sessions, so that's the majority. And among those who have multiple, like it's the most common ones have like 2 or 3, so not many. There are some extreme cases where you have up to 10 sessions in total, but that's only a few. And yeah, we still don't totally understand like how exactly this paradata works for those extreme cases, which we'll be looking on in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks. Also, question about device. Obviously, Arieke, you included the device in your analysis, but can you say what's the percentage of people who typically answered it by phone, for example?
And I remember by head that in Norway it was, I thought, something like 74%. Here, what I did was looking at the last device use. Most people use only one device. They have only one session, like Xiao said. But of course, it's possible that people switch devices. So we decided to focus on the last one. So where they either break off or complete the survey in. Yeah, I remember it was 74, I think, for Norway. And I thought in the other countries, something at least 50 on the phone.
So I had at least half of people answer it on.
Yeah, but these are Norway, Finland, and Estonia, so it might be lower in other countries.
Yeah, great. Let's see. There was also a question about you mentioned at the beginning that some countries carried the survey in multiple languages, in 2 languages. Did the team have time to look at the length of the survey by language? Not so far. Okay.
No, but it would be definitely interesting to see. Yeah.
Okay, moving to coming back to the device and the session. Maybe for Qiao, were you able to check if people change device in different sessions?
Yes, we do already have this data. So for each session, we already know like with what kind of device they logged in. We didn't use it for this particular model yet, but the data is here. Okay,
so something we'll look at. Question from At. Do you have any clue why the survey took longer in Estonia than in Finland and Norway, apart from the fact that they had more country-specific items? Do we have some insights there?
I don't know if the language is longer. We could count the number of words maybe in the questionnaire. I must say, on top of this number of additional items, they also had the theory of planned behavior items that are part of the core. While the other 2 countries didn't have those, they used the Miller items, but those were counted in the additional items. So actually the difference in items is even larger than what we showed. We don't think that internet speed is lower in Estonia.
We certainly.
The age range was a bit higher, up to 59 instead of 54, but older people get less questions, no fertility section, but maybe they have more ex-partners. Maybe they're slower, I don't know.
I'm thinking certainly that came out in the 3-country pilot that we did a few years ago, that German language did take much longer. So I don't know if that we would need to check that, but it's clear from the literature and from experience that some languages take. So we'll definitely look into that. Comment by Martin, back to the smartphone. So that obviously, considering the high share of smartphone and the fact that they're less likely to complete the questionnaire, suggests that it's very important to work on the display on smartphone. Can the team perhaps say what are we doing at the moment regarding that?
Do you want to talk about the course, Siyang, that you're taking?
No, but not generally, that we are addressing this at the moment, right?
We are looking at improving the interface for the phone, although I don't think it's that problematic the way it is now. But for example, in the French pilot, the Blaze support team, well, they did it for France. They were paid to do it, but we're trying to see if we can use that format where there's really a whole different format for small screens and large screens in our core as well. But it might take a while.
So yeah, just to bring everybody on board, indeed, in the French pilot, there was special effort made on improving the display on the smartphone, and we're currently looking if we can draw from that and implement it systematically in all countries. So this is obviously an important thing.
But I think it's clear from the literature that also in other surveys, people are more likely to break off on phones. So my feeling is that it has to do with distractions, maybe even more than layout problems.
Yeah, great. Talking of France, a question from Milan Boucher-Vallet. Was the duration of the questionnaire announced in the invitation letters? If so, was the same duration mentioned in all 3 countries? Because we could imagine that announcing a long duration discourages log-ins, while announcing a short duration might...
Yeah, that's a very good point. I know for Norway and Denmark, but Denmark was not in this presentation, that they had a different announcement. In Norway, much shorter than in Denmark, and actually the response rates were higher in Norway. So we were wondering if it had to do with that. I'm not so sure what tech. Do you know about Estonia and Finland, what they put in the letter? We recommend to announce it, but
as far as I know, there was no information about the length of the survey.
The issue is also it varies hugely between respondents, as we showed. So that would have to be stressed in the letter if you do it at all. I think in Norway they were on the positive side, something like 35 or 40. They said, I think, based on testing themselves.
Going back to Q&A, there was a question from our colleague in Austria, Isabella, about the fact that, so you did the break-off analysis at the level of section of the questionnaire. Did you have time so far to look at the level of question, and especially looking at the impact of very sensitive question? An example being in the fertility section about some question related to sexual intercourse.
I didn't do it yet, but I can say something about a paper in progress written by Tom Emery and some other authors based on the 2018 3-country pilot, where they used the web part of that pilot. And they actually did that. They identified some sensitive questions. There were maybe even more back then in the questionnaire than now. And if I remember correctly, they didn't find that people were more likely to break off there. And I've also done it myself in a very, well, not sophisticated way once for 1 or 2 countries. And I also didn't find that people stop at, for example, these sustainable development goal questions about autonomy and sex and stuff like that. So, and I think they also looked at the loop, whether people are more likely to quit in a loop section. I could look that up for you and let you know. That was in this pilot paper.
Great. let's see, are there additional questions? And again, if you want to ask the question live, just raise your hand. We still have a bit of time. If anybody among the attendees or any question. If not, anybody on the panel would like to add an additional piece of information? No? Okay, so great. Thank you to all of you. We're obviously, this is work in progress. The team is working really hard on analyzing it, and we'll be able to update this analysis once we have the data from other countries, other regions that are carrying on. So stay tuned. This was the last GGP Connect webinar. We'll resume in the fall. So thank you very much. This will be also posted in the recording on our website, so invite other colleagues to look at on this. Thank you very much. If some of you wants to chat with the team, we'll now stop officially the recording, but stay online and you can chat further with the Central Hub team. So on that, thank you for attending and see you next time. Bye.